Welcome to Deluxe. We step out of our comfort zone and into palatial design. We drop into an English romantic retreat, visit the castle for a Hollywood star, marvel at a 1970s design icon, and tour cutting-edge city design. The medieval-inspired house of designer William Morris was recently opened to the public in Britain, and design fans flocked to see the residence of one of the most influential men in the arts and craft movement. The house was always intended to be more than just a home for William and his family. It was also a leading example of how architecture and design can enhance living. And while furnishing the romantic house, William began marketing his beautiful designs.
It was his first marital home, the only house he ever commissioned, and the first place in which he and his artist friends collaborated in a way that they thought could then be translated into other people's homes. And of course, out of the work that they started at Red House came Morris and Company, and 10 years later, all the sort of fabrics and wallpapers that they're really famous for.
The house was built at the height of the Industrial Revolution in the 1860s and gained its name because the use of red brick without stucco was very uncommon at the time. Its secluded rural location was intended as an antidote to the times, when modern industrialisation was turning cities into urban jungles. William closely supervised the building of the house, which he built for his young bride, Jane Burden. Jane was a popular model for a number of the pre-Raphaelite painters. William and Jane raised 2 daughters in the art-filled home. William's contribution to interior design has been immense, and his nature-inspired wallpaper and fabrics are still highly popular in houses throughout the world. The beguiling mix of romanticism and practical common sense, obvious in the Red House, led his friend, the painter Dante Gabriele Rossetti, to declare it was more a poem than a house. The house is now owned by the National Trust, who ensure that visitors can see William's beautiful designs in situ, just as he intended. When the stunning and palatial house of NBA basketball legend Wilt Chamberlain came on the market, discerning buyers were offered a rare chance to view a very different sort of house.
Well, it's really unique. It's 70s architecture, on a grand scale, and there's not a lot of those. That can work for you or against you. In this case, one of the reasons it hasn't sold is because it's so personalized and because it's such a real example of 70s architecture. And 60s has been very popular, but not so much 70s.
Wilt was one of the greatest basketball players ever, and the game made him immensely rich, allowing him to enjoy many of the finer things in life. After Wilt's death at age 62 in 1999, his amazing house in the exclusive Los Angeles suburb of Bel Air came up for sale with an original price tag of $10 million. The mansion, built with 5 freight cars of old-growth redwood and 200 tons of Bouquet Canyon stone, has some unusual design features, including a triangular tub in the master bedroom, which can be filled with the flick of a switch. The playroom, still in pink, once featured a waterbed floor with a rabbit fur cover, but the realtors have removed it in respect for a new generation of family buyers.
I think it's important to state that this was not a den of iniquity. This was a place where people had lots of fun. Open, notorious fun. That is, the parties were out front and people enjoyed themselves, and there were a lot of, sports figures here and movie people here, and they weren't doing anything they'd be ashamed of.
Wilt's favourite nickname on and off court was the Big Dipper, due to his ability to pop the ball so easily through the hoop. And Wilt called his house Ursa Major, the more formal name for the star constellation, the Big Dipper. Realtors are hoping that someone with deep pockets will fall in love with this design gem. In a show in London's Victoria and Albert Museum, the life and works of James Stewart, an early and highly influential British designer, was celebrated.
Stewart was a real character. He was somebody you really wanted to hang out with. He was a larger-than-life personality, he had a great life, and he managed to be a pioneering designer as well. Everybody in the aristocracy seemed to think he was the man to have round to tell you how to completely make over your old, drafty, stately home, how to bring in the new style.
In the 18th century, everyone talked about classical Greece, but James realised that no one had actually visited Greece and made an accurate record of the architecture. James did just that, and he studied, measured and painted architectural wonders in Greece, Italy and Croatia. His subsequent book, Antiquities of Athens, was hugely popular, and suddenly James became the expert on a new design style, neoclassicism. The British were keen to embrace the clean, simple lines of classical architecture and to cast off the ornate styles that connected them to Catholicism and the Pope. James became interior designer to the moneyed. One of his masterpieces was the redesign of the interior of Spencer House.
It's really where it all comes together. His furniture, his painting, his design for interior ceilings. He was a complete polymath and essentially an artist. And the show reveals him as an artist first and foremost, as a creative designer.
But for some folk, a house just isn't enough. For the seriously moneyed, a castle might be just the thing. Hollywood megastar Nicolas Cage recently purchased a Bavarian castle to call his home away from home. It began with an innocent email. I was really surprised. The first contact was via the internet. Since Remax is an international company, we have our properties on international websites and in English. I had 2 castles on offer without price quotes and got this totally normal email inquiry with a normal AOL address asking how much the prices were. So I passed on the prices and got a reply saying, "My name is Nicolas Cage. I don't know whether you know me. I am an actor who is interested in your castle." Nicholas grew up watching German expressionist film, and his mother Joy has German lineage. The castle that he now owns dates from 1513. Schloss Niedstein has 28 rooms and 1,200 square metres, and it sold for what remains an undisclosed amount. The lucky real estate agent recalls how Nicholas came to make his decision to buy. When you enter through the door of a property, and in this case the door was the gate to the castle, you should get the feeling of "this belongs to me, this fits to me." Such was the case with him. He touched me slightly and said, "I think that's mine." Of course, that made me happy. The local townsfolk are very excited about a Hollywood actor with deep pockets joining their little town of 1,600. They point out that they can't help him with sushi or McDonald's, but if he likes bratwurst sausages and strong beer, he will love living there. Coming up, palatial design on a truly grand scale, from chateau to castle. A little piece of Europe has appeared in the Chinese capital, in the shape of a multi-million-dollar replica of a 17th century chateau. A Chinese entrepreneur took 3 years and spent $80 million to copy the Chateau Maison Lafayette, which can be found in France along the River Seine. The more unique the culture is, the more it should be shared with the world. China also has a lot of Baroque architecture, but we are so familiar with it that we don't pay attention. We, as the developer, have an obligation to introduce this culture to the Chinese people. Only 10 minutes from Beijing's international airport, the sudden peace and calm of the Beijing Lafayette Chateau Hotel and its extensive grounds is a delightful surprise. Modelled also on the famous chateau at Versailles and Fontainebleau, the luxury hotel has swimming pools, tennis courts, a vineyard and even an equestrian club. With over 600 rooms and 200 staff, there was an obvious need to bring in an international expert. François Odeon, an art consultant, ensures that all aspects of the hotel are true to French form, even down to the folding of the napkins. I think the feasibility of building a chateau is the highest in China. First of all, there is labour. Second of all, China is still undeveloped in a lot of ways. But in France, there are already 22,000 chateaux, which cost a fortune to maintain. To build a new chateau doesn't fit the modern environment either. It costs too much, so China has the most possibility. At this stage, the hotel is proving most popular with weddings, with up to 5 bridal parties a day choosing the magnificent hotel to celebrate their nuptials, perhaps imagining for a moment they could afford the real thing. The stunning Taj Mahal in India is perhaps the world's most instantly recognisable monument to love. The Archaeological Survey of India, custodian of India's heritage sites, recently carried out refurbishment and restoration of parts of the extraordinary site to ensure its sublime beauty will continue to last through the centuries. Emperor Shah Jahan built the white marble architectural wonder in the 17th century as a symbol of his enduring love for his third wife Mumtaz, who died during childbirth. Every year, thousands of Indian and international tourists flock to the stunning building, causing fine wear and tear. Although the most prominent part of the Taj Mahal is the highly distinctive white domed mausoleum, the Taj is actually an integrated group of structures, including other smaller mausoleums and large gateways around all four sides of the complex, which is where this renovation took place. Around 150 artisans did the modern cleaning and renovation of the gateways, but the Taj itself had an army of 20,000 stonemasons, gem cutters, marble fitters and various labourers who toiled for 22 years. In 1983, the Taj Mahal became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it was described as the jewel of Muslim art in India. If there is one country which is synonymous with castles, it's England. Centuries of rich kings, queens and nobility have meant the landscape is dotted with grand architectural statements. Now sadly, many of them are in ruins, too far gone to be saved for future generations. However, one recent restoration by the conservation body English Heritage meant that one of the most significant castles in England now has a new lease of life.
Kenilworth, we've forgotten, is the largest, strongest, best-built castle in England. It's also the grandest royal palace apart from Windsor, so it's right there at the heart of English history.
One of the most famous occupants of the castle was Queen Elizabeth I, who slept there on a small number of occasions. Portraits of her and her ill-fated lover Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, have been returned to the castle after an absence of over 500 years. Personal correspondence between the two is also on display.
The letter which Dudley wrote to Elizabeth when he came to Kenilworth on his last journey, and he died on his way here. And it's a very ordinary letter. It's saying, I'm terribly sorry, I'm not feeling very well, I'm going to take the waters at Buxton and whatever. But it is his last letter. And what does Elizabeth do? She cries over it. She folds it up. You can still see the fold marks. She writes on the back, his last letter, puts a pin through it and keeps it either under her pillow or in a casket beside her bed, where it's discovered when she dies, and here it is.
The castle itself remains in spectacular ruins, with the core of the restoration work focusing on Leicester's Gatehouse, built between 1570 and 1575, which was inhabited up until 70 years ago.
A country without a sense of history suffers from national Alzheimer's. National amnesia. We are history. What we are is a product of history. We are a product of history. If we don't know it, that doesn't mean that we're not. If we do know it, we can respond to it, we can understand it, and we can go forward confidently.
Buckingham Palace is one of the most recognisable English monuments, but it may surprise many to know that it was only completed as recently as the 1820s for King George IV. The palace was originally built as a smaller and luxurious private residence called Buckingham House. Expanded for King George, it only became an official royal palace at the accession of Queen Victoria in 1837, who called the palace home. The modern Buckingham Palace is a working building, where Her Royal Highness Elizabeth II and Prince Philip lived during the week, along with the Duke of York and the Earl and Countess of Wessex. The palace is also home to the offices of the royal household and is the workplace of approximately 450 people, with its own post office and a unique postcode. The Queen regularly entertains local and foreign dignitaries in the palatial staterooms. It is these magnificent rooms that have been open to the eager public in August and September each year for the last 12 years. In the staterooms are displayed many of the greatest pieces of art from the royal collection, intended to impress visitors to the palace. The public is also privy to a special display, which in this particular year highlighted musical entertainment. Over 6,000 visitors wander the magnificent rooms during this time. Coming up, innovative design and radical new rotating buildings. England has increasingly become the home of bold and futuristic design. And in 2004, the famous Victoria and Albert Museum in London opened a permanent gallery and website to celebrate visual design and architecture. The collection showcases international architecture and design from the last 2,000 years and includes the most contemporary work. Visitors get the chance to view the tools that architects and designers work with to let their creative imaginations loose. One of the most distinctive landmarks in London is the headquarters of insurance company Swiss Re, known affectionately by Londoners as the Gherkin. The exhibition features a unique view of the elaborate construction process with time-lapse photography. The Holiday Inn chain presented what they consider to be the hotel rooms circa 2054. These rooms change and evolve via screens, holograms and sensors, putting the choice of room design firmly in the hands of the occupier.
Certainly the historical trend with human nature, if you want to call it that, is towards a sense of mastery and control and choice over your environment. It seems very likely that this will continue.
One young designer has worked out a way of battling the darkness in her house by sewing photoelectronic lighting into her bed covers and then onto window blinds.
Because I've been doing research into kind of future living and how people might live, I didn't really expect that people would be ready to have these electronic textiles in their homes immediately. So I'm quite surprised at the response I have now and how eager people are to try it.
Also on display were the beautiful results of a unique collaboration between a team of UK designers with the world-famous glassmakers from the Salviati factory in Italy. The resulting products reveal truly futuristic forms. Large cities are often the places where radical and futuristic building design can find a place and a patron willing to take a financial risk. A London exhibition, Future City, shows how radical design has evolved between 1956 and 2006 and how much cutting-edge design makes it into actual architecture.
The show concentrates on the experimental and the utopian, so it's really the kind of cutting edge, the pioneers of architecture. It's those projects which have moved architecture forward, which have changed the nature of architecture, that have been inspiring and influential.
In the 1960s, plastics had become such an integral part of design that the idea of inflatable cities became current. This is also the first time that ideas about sustainable environments were first incorporated into design.
An idea of using local materials and energy in particular. So it's the first construction where you get the solar energy, the air, the wind forces, the water forces integrated into a building system.
Included in the show was a model of what the British industrial town Barnsley would look like if it was allowed to develop organically, and the Foreign Office architect plans for a taller and more ambitious replacement for the World Trade Centre post 9/11. For modern architects, virtual technology and computer-aided modelling make it easy to imagine innovative designs for the cities of tomorrow. The city of Beijing took a radical step into the future with some of the stunning architecture commissioned for the 2008 Olympic Games. Eggs, twisted donuts and birds' nests were among the bold architectural shapes that now dominate the skyline. All of these cutting-edge designs have been designed overseas, with the new China embracing foreign know-how and incorporating it into its ancient capital. The Dutch architect who was responsible for the unique CCTV building spoke about the issues of modernity facing Beijing.
An issue of preservation and an issue of cultural identity or continuity should really not be looked at only in this gap between old and new, but really to look at history as a much more continuous process of multiple stages and realities that emerge in the development of a city, and where each one of those constitutes a valid part of its actual identity.
The extraordinary Beijing National Stadium, or the Bird's Nest as it's affectionately known, held the opening and closing ceremonies for the Olympics and was designed by a Swiss company. The US $423 million stadium is the world's largest steel structure, and its dazzling shape was based on Chinese ceramics. The stadium can hold 80,000, although seats for 91,000 were squeezed in for the Olympics. The new National Centre for the Performing Arts has been surrounded by controversy because of the extraordinary budget blowout. The final price tag on the magnificent glass and titanium French-designed theatre was rumoured to be around $1 billion. The new performing arts venue certainly ensures that Beijing now joins the ranks of most desirable places to perform for world-class entertainers. It also shows that innovation and futuristic design does not come cheap. Even a stunning view from a top skyscraper can become dull. But what about if the view moved? In perhaps the most striking example of design breaking with expectations, an American architect has unveiled plans for moving buildings to be constructed in Dubai and Moscow.
First of all, they are the first building that rotates, that move, that change their shape. This building never looked the same, not one in their lifetime. I call these buildings designed by time, shaped by life.
The skyscrapers have been designed with independently rotating floors powered by the wind. The Dubai Tower, which stands at 80 stories, is set for a 2010 opening and consists of offices, a hotel, apartments and 10 luxury villas. An extra bonus for the luxury villas at the top is that they will be able to control their own rotation. As for the rest of the building, the movement will be controlled by architects who will choose the slowly evolving design.
I started to face this project knowing that skyscrapers suffer a lot from the wind, and I say, why not we use the wind? Why not we use nature for our benefit instead of fighting nature? Let's use the wind. So I decided to put the wind turbines, the same that we know in the fields, vertical, a bit smaller, and put them between the floors horizontally.
The building process will also be unique, with each floor being constructed in Italy first, then shipped and assembled on location. The idea being that a prefabricated process will involve less time on location, less expense, and faster, safer construction.
It means higher, better quality, faster, safer construction site, and the most important somehow, less expensive. So not only for luxury skyscrapers, this method is going to be used for any buildings in the future to allow everybody to afford a better, less expensive home.
Traditional or radical, palatial designs dominate the landscape, inspiring us all.